Hey guys, how's it going? It's Luigi here. With the recent release of Final Fantasy VII Remake and Resident Evil 3, I couldn't help but notice the continuous rise of game remakes and sequels over new and original ones. Today we're gonna analyze how games got to this point and what it could mean for the future of the medium. Let's get started. To understand how the modern economy for new games works, we need to first take a step back to the early days. Gaming is a fairly new medium compared to the older established ones, and the first games were nothing but scientific experiments. Sidetrack warning. Contrary to popular belief, the very first game wasn't Pong, made by Atari, but by a physicist. William Higginbotham created Tennis for Two to showcase the capabilities of his instrumentation at Brookhaven National Laboratory Yearly Exposition. Though, in fairness, Pong was the very first video game available to the public, and for the scope of this video, that's all we care about. Big budgets are a thing of the modern age, because back in the day, video games were seen as nothing more than a gimmick by big investors. Their creation was solely based on the devs' passion and the little funding they could muster. Over the years, as the medium grew in popularity, newer games' budgets grew more and more, pulling more investors into them. Another sidetrack warning. To understand why investors are important in this discussion, I'll make a quick explanation of how game developing works. You have two main players when a game is made, the game publisher and the game developer, or developers, based on the size of the project. Usually, the game developing company will come up with the idea for a new game, but if the game is a sizable one, they probably won't have the money to fund it. So they ask the game publisher money to fund the game, and once it's done, the publisher will obviously keep a cut of the revenue, hoping to make profits of the investment. That's where investors come in. Having invested lots of money in the publishing company, they have decision-making power when it comes to how their money is spent. The worst part of all this deal is that it's pretty unlikely that investors will be hardcore gamers supporting games that they actually care about. Instead, they just see gaming like the latest trend and aim to milk this cash cow as long as it's hot. It's common to see game developers complain about having to change core game mechanics to accommodate filthy microtransactions. And I'm pretty sure most of us still remember Battlefront 2, right? What this also means is that these investors don't give a flying fuck about innovative and cool but financially risky games. They tend to prefer safer approaches like sequels, for example, where the brand identity is already established, so you more or less already know if people are going to like it. The concept of having sequels isn't the major problem of the industry though. In fact, when done right, it's amazing to see whole characters like Mario or Zelda still. Hey, it's Luigi from the future here, and I literally just called Link Zelda. You can unsubscribe now. Yeah, back to the video. Still thriving today. The problem arises when sequels being made have no place or purpose. Some examples are worse than others, so let me get the worst one out of the way first. You don't need a goddamn FIFA game every year. While the sports games market is absolutely out of control, with companies like EA milking their customers $70 yearly for a glorified DLC of last year's game, I think a case can be made for other games. I never expected to say something like this, but I'm quite happy with what Ubisoft... Shit, I really can't say that. Okay. I'm quite happy with what Ubisoft has done with Assassin's Creed. They saw the franchise was suffering from yearly releases, so they just stopped doing them. The game benefited incredibly from that, going from a stale game looking the same every year to an actually refreshing new game to look forward to. I can already feel Bobby Kotick having an heart attack hearing me say this, but I think Call of Duty should follow the same path. For one, game developers wouldn't get overworked all the way to depression, and that's a very nice thing, right, Bobby? And secondly, the game would benefit in all sorts of ways from releasing every 2 years, like being more polished and avoid saturating your own market, since your last game will sell for 2 years instead of 1. Sequels are pretty easy games to read in terms of their scope. It's quite clear when a game's existence is just a matter of profit and when it's about passion for the franchise. But I wanted to talk about remakes because the line gets much blurrier. Depending on the way you see it, remakes can be worse or better than sequels. Let's analyze both cases. A remake could literally be a cheap way to slap some HD textures on an old classic and get an opportunity to resell that for $40. It's low effort and nasty. Just a way to get profit without actually putting in new work or an actually new game. While this case can be true for a few games, there's also the opposite side of the spectrum. And I think no game summarizes this better than Resident Evil 2. Last year, I've been blown away by how stark the contrast was from Resident Evil 1 Remake. I wholeheartedly think the remake tag doesn't do justice to such an amazing game, instead deserving to be a reboot of the franchise and just being called Resident Evil 2. Nothing has been salvaged from the past game, apart from the original story. It completely annihilates the past notion we had about remakes being cheap rip-offs, and instead does what I think remakes with a purpose do best: give an old classic a brand new audience. I'm in a weird spot. I'm 21, and even though I could have technically played many classics, I didn't get a console until a Wii, effectively missing on all the games from the 5th and 6th generation. But I'm still old enough to have played games from those years back when I was little, and nowadays still understand their appeal. And this is where I think remakes strike a perfect balance. Sure, they're not entirely new games, but if there's passion behind them, it's gonna be like they are. They're an amazing way for a new, younger audience to enjoy an old classic, and they're a love letter to fans old enough to have played the original. A few weeks ago, I had the delight of playing the amazing Final Fantasy VII Remake demo, and I've been glued to the screen for the entirety of it. And in a way, I felt a kind of envy. The more I was amazed by how this game played and looked, the more I couldn't stop thinking about how mind-blowing it must feel for someone who has played the original. I'm glad these amazing remakes are being made, but I still wish game publishers wouldn't be so blindly greedy and for once actually care about the medium they're funding, by leaving studios free to develop whatever game they wanted, without being forced to keep doing on sequel after sequel. This way, we could have a healthy economy of new games, based on revisiting and recreating the past, while simultaneously building a solid foundation of new IPs for the future. Luckily, in later years, indie games have come to subsidize the lack of new and innovative games, making gaming feel a bit like the old days, where only the ones who dared will come out victorious. So no, I don't think remakes and sequels are winning gaming, but game publishers are walking a fine line here, and seeing how the community has been supporting small indie studios, things will have to change in the future. If big game companies will want to stay relevant in the eyes of their core community, they will have to learn to dare, the same way they dared back in the beginning. That's the end of my essay. If you have opinions to share, feel free to leave in the comments. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one.